Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat. I'm with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
I would like everybody to know, wish discernment for them more than all else. Not ready yet to each in their own time. Long has it been in coming to this. Wallowing through the uncertainty of false righteousness, trailing fragment truth, the Spirit found me courting awkward circumstance. Chill moments of uncertain knowing, recognition with others of kindred soul, muse-led, poem as ritual, remembrance, awakening, I went seeking others. We are to remind each other, one another, of past legend, even as we question our own soul's knowing. And now we can laugh, passing time, sharing passages of favored scriptures, poems, immortalized to paper. He will come again, announcing presence with signs and wonder. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio on Studio B. And tonight I'm going to cover and read to you the last portion of the Thracian Chronicles, the book of Longinus, which is a very interesting text. But I also wanted to let people know that I am almost finished with the calendar, which basically converts the ancient Hebrew calendar, the lunar-based calendar, to that of the Gregorian solar-based calendar, and it aligns them in unity so that those of you that have had difficult time trying to discern and to make sense of the teachings that I've been bringing forth on how to figure out when Kadesh occurs, which is the time of the new moon, and how to determine the 4 sabbatical weeks which follow in succession after Kadesh. This particular calendar will help explain all that in great detail so that you can just look at, every month and every week and be able to not only know what the months are as well as the day according to the Hebrew calendar, and become familiar with the name of the months in that manner. But you'll also be able to determine when the Sabbaths occur in alignment, because there's 5 in each lunar month, and they fall on different days of the week according to the Gregorian calendar. And so, and whereas most people have believed that all these Sabbaths, or that Sabbath occurs once in every 7 days. This is not how it plays out according to the ancient Hebrew lunar calendar. And so I have created and spent the last couple weeks working on this in order to help people to be able to make better sense of how they come together, because each Gregorian year is different, and the Hebrew calendar aligns differently with each one of the years. And so, like Passover and the seven Levitical feast days, they all fall differently each year as well, according to the solar based calendar. And so I thought this would be an easy way for people to, just in having a regular calendar, to make that determination and to be able to keep alignment with it in that way. And so I've got just a couple other things that I'm going to tweak on it, but I think probably by next week I'll be finished, and then I'll be able to share with you link those of you that are interested. It's gonna sell at a very reasonable price, basically, for what you would spend on any other calendar. So I think probably about like $15 or so. And I'm not, trying to make money off of it. It's just basically to provide you a service so that those of you that are interested in following Sabbath can do so, and also Sabbath, according to the way that it occurs, because the Kadesh is excluded from the following four sabbatical weeks. It occurs differently according to each Gregorian solar based month. And so, anyways, when I release it, I'll explain it in greater detail. But tonight, I'm going to finish up. If I, um, if we have the time to, which I'm going to go ahead and get into the text very soon, because I have 6 chapters, and some of them are very extensive, but the rest of the story is very interesting. And I do have, I believe Kathy will be able to share with you the links in the chat room to the 2 previous programs on the Thracian Chronicles. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Yeah, Kathy's already shared a couple of those. But anyways, it's a fascinating story, incredibly interesting text, and it's one that you're not going to find this story in the English. There is some mythology surrounding Longinus, from what I understand, in the Eastern Orthodox Church, that he is considered to be a saint. And so, anyways, I did share a lot of that information on his background. One thing I do need to clarify just right up front is that in some of the mythology, some of the old stories about Longinus, it it speaks about him as being born in Cappadocia, which, according to the work of Dr. Stephen Guide, and who is the person that decoded the Thracian script, he was born in Sophia, which is a a place in Bulgaria which was part of ancient Thrace. And he says it throughout the text, how the Thracian people are his mother culture, and how, he's basically a Thracian soldier um, that was a part of the Roman army, and that's how he ended up being there on the Hill of the Skulls and Calvary during Yeshua's crucifixion, and how he was the soldier that had pierced the side of Christ during his crucifixion, and having become witness to all of um, the miraculous happenings that had occurred as sign in both the heaven and the earth, with the blood red moon, the eclipse, the lunar eclipse, and also with the earthquakes. And we know that the veil of the temple was rent, and that there were other signs which took place, which confirmed to him that they had indeed murdered the Son of God. And so he became a disciple, and the first two parts speak about his conversion in having become a disciple and also hanging out with the apostles. And so in this story, we'll pick it up in the last chapter of section 2. He and the other apostles were going out and trying to cast out demons from uh, the different people that they found in the area which were possessed. And they had failed to do so because they had come up against some very strong uh, legion. And so when we go into this chapter, we'll pick up with that particular story. And then there are some very interesting portions in the latter chapters. I think when we get to chapter 15 and onwards, that are really absolutely mind blowing, because they speculate on uh, things in the future and interdimensional dimensions, lucid dreaming. I mean, just the book is so very profound. But anyways, in the first portion, just to catch you up for those that did not hear about or have had listened to those particular shows, just a really quick breakdown of the first two segments. In the first one, the blood of Yeshua spills into Longinus's blind eye, and he becomes healed. And then after becoming healed, he he is invited by the apostles to come and hang out with them, and then he meets Lazarus. And Lazarus shares with him the story of his resurrection. And it's very profound, and it convicts him. It really touches his heart. It fills him with the Spirit. And then in the second portion, he goes out with the apostles, and they're trying to cast out spirits. And he meets Martha, who's Lazarus's sister, and she tells him that Lazarus shares the story of how they believe, or how his sister believed, that Yeshua was the Son of God, and how Lazarus thought this was all blasphemous. And basically warned his sister to not tell anybody or to not say or speak about these kind of things to anybody else. Um, and so, he Lazarus is telling the story to Longinus about his resurrection, about also how he had dreamed that in his dream that Yeshua was the Son of God, and that um, the portion that is not relayed in the Gospels in the regular King James version of the Bible is that when Christ called Lazarus from the tomb, he actually had to go into Sheol and free him from the bondage of hell. And this was the same kind of thing which occurred during his crucifixion for the 3 days that he was away from his body. He had descended down into the depths of Sheol, and he had freed the patriarchs from Adam to the thief that died on the cross. And there's a book called the Gospel of Nicodemus, the second portion called the Descent into Hell, which really details and elaborates on this story. Um, and anyway, so it was the same thing that had to happen to Lazarus, but he wasn't with everybody else, he was by himself. And so we're going to go ahead and pick up on chapter 12. It says this. Right away, it came to my mind. Oh, I need to make one other final comment, too. You have to also remember that my friend who translated this text into English, that English is not his first language. And so, with it not being his first language, he does not, the syntax is off. And so, some things might not read correctly, but and so you'll understand why as I'm reading this portion of the text. But all right, continuing. Right away, it came to my mind what would have happened to me, Longinus, who is 100 years old, if I was one of those misfortuned legionnaires, which Isus is the name of Yeshua in the Thracian. If Isus had turned us into pigs, I knew many legionnaires, and I wouldn't exaggerate if I said that many of them wouldn't need to be turned into pigs because they were already real pigs. I often wondered why Rome tolerated such people to participate in the line of its legions, but yet Rome needed people to fight and die for it. Certainly, Caesar thought that it would be better if the pigs died in battle, I thought. I know how it was difficult for me to maintain order and discipline among such soldiers, how suitable Isus called them pigs as if he were inside their hearts and souls. Captivated, I continued to listen to Lazarus, who had no intention of ending his story, despite that we were at a late hour and it would soon be morning. There wouldn't be any sleeping time this night. In the morning, I had to show up in the barracks and to return to my official duties. I was tired, but I was also very agitated. So I couldn't stop thinking of the very touching words of this wise man who continued to speak tirelessly. After 2 days, all the disciples returned from their task and gathered together with Jesus. They brought with them an old man and his son and placed them in the middle. Then the old man fell face downward and bowed before the teacher, and he begged Jesus with tearful voice, "Gentle teacher, my son is suffering a bad possession. The evil spirit had thrown him into the fire and into the water, and is trying to kill my son in any possible way that he can. Your disciples tried to help, but they just couldn't free him. I beg you to help my son as you helped others. Please heal him so my life might have meaning." And Peter confirmed what the old man said, that they had all tried to chase out the spirit, but couldn't succeed. Why, God? Why didn't we succeed? And why don't we succeed very often? Yeshua said, "Because your faith is weak. And this kind of thing needs fasting and praying." And after Jesus looked in my eyes, he approached the young man and said, "If any one of you had so little faith as a mustard seed, you would be able to say to this mountain, 'Who art thou, O great mountain?' Before Zerubbabel, thou shalt become a plain. Rise up, move from there, and throw yourself in the sea. Unclean spirit, leave him." I was convinced that not one of us understood what exactly Jesus was saying and why he said that. Though I saw with my opened eyes the mountain and the soul of this young man, and I comprehended that this was the image of a very strong demon which dwelled inside of this man, so strong and powerful, firm like a mountain. I saw and heard how Isis recognized the demon and called it by its name, and how Isis commanded it to leave and to throw itself into the sea. What happened next was that the mountain truly was cast out into the sea like a big heavy stone and sank down not to be found. But while the mountain was sinking, the young man was crumbled by the demon for the last time. Nobody perceived this but me. After this day, the young man returned to normal, and he himself followed Jesus. He became one of his 70 disciples. As Lazarus was a good storyteller, I would listen to him much longer that evening, but the sun was appearing on the horizon, and I had to return to my soldiers because my furlough was ending. I said goodbye to everyone from the house of Joseph, and we agreed to meet again during the first possible opportunity because I was hungry and thirsty for more which concerned Isis and his life. I didn't know that soon I would not be able to see any of them, and I never met Lazarus again. When you are a military man, you never know when and where you are next appointed duty. On the next day, I was sent together with Caesar's legions to Caesarea, and from there we sailed for Cyprus, where we stayed for 2 years. After that, we were called to Italy to back her up. So God's plan for my life was obviously quite different from my own. At the very end, I met some truly godly men with whom I wanted to become more acquainted, and to converse with. But God didn't allow it. I couldn't blame him because what in common did I have with God's faithful disciples? I, who killed their God. At the same time, I still believed that God had rejected me forever and that he wouldn't forgive me. I would certainly end up in hell, deserving it altogether. Chapter 13. But destiny was kind to me, and it seemed that God didn't wish my destruction. And what happened more was that I was given a higher rank for military merits and was appointed as chief for a whole garrison in Philippi, a country city in Thrace. Obviously, they sent me there because I knew well the language of the locals, and the authorities assumed that because of this, I would be able to pacify the population there more easily, since they were not so hospitable towards the presence of the Roman legions. I didn't expect in my wildest imaginations to meet again Maria from Magdala, Mary Magdalene, in Philippolis. She had returned to her native land after Isis had died, together with some of her countrymen who were among his disciples. I was very much surprised that she recognized me. She invited me to her home where she lived together with some of her friends. I absolutely couldn't refuse her invitation because I didn't want to miss more information. All right, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get back into the text because I want to be sure that I'm able to finish it tonight. All right. I was very much surprised that she recognized me. She invited me to her home where she lived together with some of her friends. I absolutely couldn't refuse her invitation because I didn't want to miss out on more information, and I also wanted to know what happened to Isis's followers after I left Israel. Maria was a completely different person. Um, Really quick, for those that don't know, Mary Magdalene, she was the one that was brought before Christ by the Pharisees, and they were expecting him to stone her, to pick up a stone and stone her and the crowd to stone her to death. And she said, he said, let him who is without sin cast the first stone. And that's when the crowd dispersed. And then he said to Mary Magdalene, does anybody convict you? And because the whole crowd had scattered, she said, no, my Lord. And she said, and that's when Christ told her, neither do I convict you. Now go and sin no more. And that's when um, she became a disciple to Christ and changed her whole life around. And so this is that person that is being spoken about. Maria was a completely different person. She was still beautiful, as if the lost years didn't affect her. But her charisma was different from that which I remembered of that debauched night which I spent with her. She was radiant and shining as if she was cleansed, and I couldn't believe that this was the same lady of pleasure who once amazed all men with her seductive skills. She was calm and filled with inner peace. You couldn't see anything which in her gestures would be considered seductive, but instead, one witnessed from her a pure, benevolent, sisterly concern. She was telling me wonderful things regarding how her life had changed after she had met Isis, and she spoke enthusiastically of his second coming when he would bring to the kingdom of justice, bring to the world the kingdom of justice. One day when I visited Maria, she introduced me to a man, Pavel, Paul, or Paulus. He was very knowledgeable and a literate man who was a follower of Isis and who was also called the Apostle. He was speaking before a huge crowd in the square of the city of Philippi and before the capital, where he gained a lot of new followers, whom he, Paul, used to meet later in their homes. Maria told me that Pavel had established an assembly for the faithful in Philippi, and one day she invited me to their gathering. That evening, the apostle spoke of necessity of forgiveness of sins, which could only be possible through Isis's sacrifice, which he accomplished before the God of the universe. That is, before his own sacrifice on the cross as redemption for all of humanity and as a gift for all who will believe in him, so they may not go to hell, Hades, and everlasting condemnation, but because of forgiveness, inherit an everlasting life. Maria was standing beside me and whispered to my ear, "It was this way the Son of God forgave me the fornicator, and gave me eternal life. He can do the same with you." I couldn't see any logic in her words because even if she was a beautiful fornicator, whom a man would understand, or a man would understand and forgive easily, my circumstances were different. I was not only a soldier, my hands were saturated with the spilt blood of the guilty and the innocent. There's more to it. I was the executioner who spilt the innocent blood of the very Son of God. There is no way I could eradicate myself from God's just judgment. But Maria continued to insist, exclaiming that there were no unpardonable sins. Should someone repent with their whole heart and accept the personal sacrifice of the Son of God as redemption for our sins. I decided to stay until the late evening so I could ask the apostle myself after he finished his speech. It was very late when people started to disperse, but I couldn't leave and miss the opportunities to speak to the apostle, especially when Maria was close to him and promised to acquaint me with Paul. From this point, everything went fast because I forgot things in my half awakened state. Certainly, I was exhausted by the 2 days' march, including this long night, which prevented me from getting any sleep. But I remembered the apostle's authoritative words when he raised me to my feet after I bowed to kiss his feet filled with tears, in begging God for mercy and forgiveness. Brother Longinus, God has forgiven and made you his child. See, now the Holy Spirit will descend over you, and the power of the Almighty will enlighten you. After that, Paul, lay his 2 hands on my head and began to pray in an unknown language. And I staggered and had the feeling that I would lose consciousness. something which I experienced before and after during heavy and bloody battles. Something like a fire went through my whole body. I wanted to say something, but my tongue was entangled and I started to lisp something undiscernible, as if I couldn't remember Rome's language, nor that of my own native Thracian tongue. I could only grasp isolated words from my ancient Thracian speech, words which I heard expressed only by Thracian priests. Something sounded like praise the great God, and his name is the Sun and Justice, or the just Sun had risen, or something of that regard. And after that, I seemed to hear Esus, the god of Thrace, and other such similar but unconnected phrases. So for more than 1 hour, I murmured such an outpouring of tears, emotions, and gratitude. In that moment, I was certain that Esus forgave me. I felt forgiven, redeemed, and eternally saved. Later, I fell asleep in Maria's home. In the morning, I was alone with Maria, the apostle that had that same evening already left because he had to travel a long way in order to reach Thessalonica. I awoke again in Maria's bed, but this time it wasn't like being with a lady of pleasure. This time she was my angelic savior, a saintly benefactress. From now on, I was a part of her brotherhood, and I tried not to miss a single gathering of the faithful. I was reborn. Yes, I had become one of the faithful followers. Chapter 14. Around 2 years had passed. Soon I would see Esus alive, and he would begin speaking with me in dreams and visions. I will never forget my first meeting with him. Despite that I was one of his followers, I didn't yet make a distinction between heavenly and earthly things, even though I followed God and kept the commandments according to his word. I was full, but with faith and unbounded enthusiasm. For me, God was everywhere, and I remember how he came invisibly to help me whenever I called upon him. I knew him like a good father, and I relied upon him for everything. Well, regarding my first meeting, one day when I was in bed, the door to my room opened and I heard a voice saying, "Esus is entering." I was really frightened because I thought that my earthly journey was ending. As well, I was uncertain if God approved of me or if he would reject me, even though I had tried to follow his commandments. I made an effort to lift up my eyes towards him while he was entering, but I couldn't even move my eyes. They just dropped to the floor. I was engulfed by a ghastly horror. The whole of my being began to shake. My body stiffened, and I wasn't even able to breathe. I felt the ground shaking beneath my feet. I heard a strong noise roaring, and a strong wind spanned around me like a whirlwind which pulled me up in the air. I was just able to whisper and beg for mercy because if God didn't leave me in peace, I would die in any moment. And so I was pulled up by the whirlwind higher and higher, and I had the feeling that this was God's Spirit. I tried as much as I could to look around, and I saw that I was lifted up above the clouds of heaven. Then I saw stars around me. The force pushed me with dizzying speed among the starry heaps, and I didn't believe that I would ever return home. And see, I saw a huge throne which flew among the stars and which was coming closer to me. On the throne sat somebody who was extremely terrifying, powerful, and famous. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't look him in the face, nor could I examine how he looked, because I felt in his presence everything in my body would collapse and melt down. I recognized this somebody as the same being whom I saw before me hanging upon the cross. I could only beg for mercy that he wouldn't take my life now, because I hadn't yet done good deeds in his name, nor did I expect to be saved if I died so early. I begged him to return me home so that I might serve him and not be punished after I died. Then his words were strongly embedded into my mind. You are my chosen co vessel. After I heard these words, I regained my composure and found myself again at home. Since that remarkable day, which I will never forget, my life began to change in a way that brought me closer to God, Jesus, and my encounters with Him were more frequent, especially during my worldly probation and carnal problems. During these encounters with His Spirit, many things did repeat in similar fashion, and through them, I learned to discern when I studied His Word. Usually, my being caught up in the Spirit did not begin through my own desire. Most often, I was awakened by a loud noise, like a call from a pipe or ringing from a bell, by earthquake and fear of God's presence. After that, there was the appearance of a gust of wind or a whirlwind, which would carry me into the air. I flew over countrysides, forests, mountains, and even populated places. And then I would encounter God, Jesus himself. I also encountered other people, both known and unknown, but mostly saints whom I was unacquainted and learned about for the first time. It wasn't long that my fears vanished and I began to enjoy and even anticipate such moments eagerly, because I especially loved flying without wings and being uplifted above the horizon where one could witness marvelous sights. I often met interesting people and shared valuable conversations which opened my mind and revealed many secrets. I was still young and inexperienced, so I didn't understand the meaning of these events, but I enjoyed and longed for them because they encouraged me in my spirit. It made me feel special, like I was God's chosen friend. Yes, can you imagine me who pierced him, but now who was his chosen friend? What mercy and what great love God had shown towards me, a repentant sinner. There were other things which occurred as well during these kinds of flights when I was carried off. I was attacked sometimes by unknown people with bad intentions, people who chased me, and so I had to fly very high in order to get away from them. Another time I fought them with my spear and sword, and yet another time a heavenly battalion of soldiers intervened in order to help me against my attackers. And when the heavenly soldiers caught them, they carried them away to a place unfamiliar to me. Anyway, I was left alone and could proceed to fly freely. I even had experiences of another character in which I was snatched away in the spirit. This time, I didn't fly or I couldn't fly, but I walked normally like we do on this earth, and I felt how the soles of my feet touched the ground like in reality. Unlike ordinary or normal dreams, if you will, I also had dreams of entering into that wonderful world which felt completely real in every aspect, in a way that I experienced things in this earthly world. I'm going to stop here for a second. Now, um, there's a passage in the scripture where Paul speaks about being taken to the third heaven, and he says whether he was in body or not, he could not understand. But he just knows that he was taken there to that space. And whether it was in his physical body or not, he couldn't, relate. And it's my opinion that some of what Longinus is speaking about here is what people might reference as lucid dreaming. In that, because my being a lucid dreamer, I've also had these same kinds of experiences. And I remember that when I had was first learning to fly in my dreams, how I would flap my arms like a chicken, thinking that, that was the way to fly. But in dreaming, what you do is you project your will forward. And that in projecting your will and in projecting your intent, that is what causes you to move. And I guess it would be similar if you were like a superhero, that you would have to project your will in that kind of a manner, or at least it would seem to be. And so, in the next few chapters, some of the things that Longinus is going to be speaking about, in my opinion, are related to the dreaming world and to this other aspect um, of the dream state. And he also, in a later part, will speak about these parallel dimensions and these parallel worlds, and how also that he was able to see things which, I guess, much like Nostradamus, in seeing into the future, he was able to see, things, aircraft or submarines. I believe it's the Colburn Bible that has some prophecies of, when men, and this was written at a time when these things weren't possible, but some of what Longinus will be describing, it will be similar in circumstance um, to having a visionary gift of being able to see almost into the future. And so I'm going to continue on. In some occasions, I was hungry and ate food and drank liquids in that other world. And I can say with certainty that there were also chariots without horses. Does not this sound like the Ezekiel's wheel? All right, we'll be right back. Hey, welcome back, everybody, for second hour. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Studio B on Revolution Radio. And I do want to just really quickly remind everybody, the listening audience, that Revolution Radio is the largest listener supported, commercial free, and corporate free radio network on the internet and in the world. There's two studios, A and B, and there's many. I don't even know the exact count. I believe it was well over 80 different hosts coming to you 7 days a week, not exactly 24/7, but certainly most of the hours of the day were filled, and where you could hear somebody speaking about all the various important current events, topics, esoteria, conspiracy, um, and even biblical prophecy and things of that nature, like in the shows that I do, coming to you in every day of the week. And so if you can, go to freedomslips.com, click on the donate button, support us in our endeavor to continue growing and expanding the populations that we reach, as far as broadening our horizons and others, and reaching people through satellite, which is the next endeavor. But um, all right, I do want to go ahead and get back into this text, because I want to make sure that I have enough time to cover the rest of the chapters. But as you can see, from that last passage that I was speaking about, Longinus is now speaking about chariots that are pulled or driven without horses. Now, how interesting is that? And so, in chariots which can fly. And so, whether he's seeing these in his dream visions or in meeting with the Most High God, like in the series that I've done on the throne of God, I talk about how the um, the Most High is the throne of God is at the third heaven, and that the cherubim and the even the 4 and 20 elders, they surround him and sing praises to him, and that they descend back and forth from the heaven and the earth below what would be the ladder that Jacob saw, the ascending and descending ladder that the angels move up and down upon, and that many like Ezekiel, Isaiah, Enoch, several of the Old Testament patriarchs were witness to the same kind of vision and described the same thing that Longinus is now speaking about in seeing the throne of God and Yeshua sitting on it. And so, um, some of these things that we're going to go into, you got to remember this text is 5500 BC. I mean, it's a very old text, and it wasn't until just recent that it was deciphered. And so these things are absolutely mind-blowing when you really think and consider it. All right, so continuing, I can say with certainty that there were also chariots without horses, chariots which could fly, and many other perfected things which gave the impression as if they were from the future. Some of the things which I saw there and which I experienced occurred later in a determined resemblance. Still haven't exactly figured out what that means. I have to get with my translator to, to really clarify some of these things, which I will do before we publish all this material. On our earth and the world we know, other things were not of literal character, but served a purpose for my implementation in my own life. Chapter 15. Step by step, I was realizing that in the other parallel Earth world, there are different zones, or what I consider to be dimensions, containing different things. Some zones are exactly like in the world in which we live, but there are perfect and just and blameless zones or dimensions. Sometimes I met their duplicates of people who still live here on the earth, sort of like our higher selves or our guardian selves. It was of great value to me to hear what they thought of the world in which they live, where they are not able to lie or able to hide their true selves. Other zones look similar to the heavenly places where angels and saints meet and speak to each other and to God in majestic temples and courts, which likeness is not to be found in our ordinary world. Also in the shows that I've been doing on the throne of God, I also did um, spoke about paradise and how paradise is also located in the third heaven, and that this is where the New Jerusalem and the city of God currently is, and that this is also where the patriarchs, Adam to the thief and that died on the cross with Yeshua, that the first resurrection, they were taken up and they were baptized in the Arturian lake and allowed to enter into the city of God. And they are there and have been there since that time. And so this is the same New Jerusalem that is mentioned in Revelation 19 that will descend out of the heavens and be brought to the earth, and that those that are counted and numbered with the elect and counted to be worthy will be allowed to enter into New Jerusalem for what will be the millennial reign. And so it's my opinion that Longinus is speaking about the same thing, and that even Enoch and even Paul, he spoke about this. And so many do. It's all the same thing. All right, continuing. In the beginning, during my trips to Tarakia, to the other parallel Earth, I didn't see any useful utilization which I could apply. To my knowledge, these trips remain to be just an exotic spiritual experience. The most joyful part was to get hands on that world because I encountered there the wonderful presence of God, Isis, who loved me and who helped me in everything in my life. So he was always that real companion in life. In a way, I saw him and got to know him in closer range. Naturally, this was made my faith in him stronger and unshakable. I didn't seek for more because this was absolutely enough for me. But soon I started to realize a new phenomena, which apparently would be just a pure pragmatic application in my everyday life in this earthly world. And the fact was that a lot of the things which I was finding or receiving in Tarakia, and I'll tell you what that means when I get to the footnotes, turned to have been transferred from there to the earthly Tarakia. And Terakia is Terakeya, to my simple human world. In other words, I was realizing slowly that in that parallel world, there are many things which I can bring here to our world. And in the opposite way, I can bring some things to that other world. This discovery made me very satisfied because many of the things out there were attributed easily and immediately only if you asked. But here, in the difficult earthly life, it is required a lot of effort for years in order to achieve something. And in my opinion, what Longinus is speaking about here is manifestation, and how Yeshua showed us that because he's God, he's able to instantly manifest, just like when he fed the masses, the 5,000 masses with the three fish and the two loaves, or something of that nature. I don't remember the exact numbers, but the process is the same even here on the earth, but it takes a longer duration of time to bring forth an idea, and then in putting forth effort to manifest that idea, we can bring it from a dream into reality. But in the dream world, and in also in what would be our when we are in the millennial reign, and also when we are in our glorified bodies and our glorified being, and we are restored our bright nature, when we think thought, we will quickly achieve, and we will be able to manifest those kind of things much quicker, and with less effort than what we are required to do in order to accomplish some task here upon the earth. All right, continuing. This discovery made me very satisfied, because many of the things out there were attributed easily and immediately, only if you ask. But here in the difficult earthly life, it is required a lot of efforts for years in order to achieve something. Receiving things from that other world saved me a lot of efforts and other expenditures and complications. There were also some things from our everyday life which were easy to receive and to transfer them to the other world. But there they have more value, because they have completely different meaning. It's the same thing with prayer. When we pray, we don't see the impact or understand how prayer affects this world. But indeed, it does. And it's even been scientifically verified and attributed in that manner, that there's real energy behind prayer, and behind intending thought in that way. Just like the individual uh, that took water and intended certain thoughts into the water, and then was able to um, look at the geometry, the sacred geometry of the water, and the form that it would manifest and take on when you attribute that kind of thought. I forget the name of that movie where they did that. Uh, what the bleep, something of that nature. They did that, but you can find that research on YouTube too. What the bleep in the world, or something like that. But anyways, all right, continuing. From this moment, I experienced and happily comprehended the discovery of the first travelers to the new lands, people who understood benefits from the richness which are hidden inside. For example, in Africa and India, if they could just be transferred successfully to Europe. The fact is that the opposite transfer of goods from Europe to these remote lands have also beneficial priority. Such similar stimulus caused the discovery and the maintenance of secure seaways to the new lands, and as well migration and colonization. So completely spontaneously and naturally was born inside me the desire to discover a way through which I could be able to enter and to leave Terakia, to be able to move frequently and in a secure way between our world and that other world, so I could use things practically from the privileges poured out from similar possibilities. After years had passed, I already collected into a heap multiple experiences in Terrakia, the other earth, which most of them lasted for a short time, and only because of the repeated travels was I able to get a basic understanding or a basic picture of that parallel world. But still, I wasn't able to stay there for long, nor did I learn how to pass through the gates of God's city by my own will, no matter how much I tried to learn to do so. I was seeking the doors of the city and I wanted to learn how to find them and how to pass through whenever I wanted. I couldn't either determine the position of its streets and its surroundings. Tarakia, it says, this chapter strengthens the idea of what was said previously, that Tarakia seems to be another earth, a parallel twin earth mixed with heavenly places. And the new Mataric, could this be New Jerusalem prepared in that parallel land? So New Mataric, whenever it mentions New Mataric, associate that to New Jerusalem as well. All right, finishing the chapter. Um, I almost lost my conviction that this could ever be possible for me to learn one day how to do it. But one particular day, when I found myself in Tarakia, in that other world, I heard words from God which made me to reconsider all my understanding and my ideas regarding God's city. On this day, God Himself showed me the doors of His city, and He showed me the day when they will be opened for many. God said, "You will open doors for people in your world instead, which lead to my city, so the chosen by me may pass through the new Mataric. In this new Mataric, the travel needs of all saved humans will be allowed. Go, therefore, and teach the faithful disciples of the mysteries which were hidden from the consciousness of the world until your epoch. See, I have spoken to you." And so it would be similar to what John the Revelator saw in chapter 19 of the book of Revelation. Chapter 16. "Therefore, I am teaching you, my son Theophil," that's Longinus's son, who at the very beginning of this text, he's writing this account of his becoming a disciple of Christ to his son Theophil to relate, the stories of his conversion. "Therefore, I am teaching you, my son Theophil, of these secrets. So when God's Spirit comes upon you and reveals the words of the speech, which the portal gate of the city itself listens to, you may also pass through it and be together with God. And the portal, the gate of the city, is in the wilderness, raised up like a big falcon in the midst of the rocks or cliffs. His is also the sign of the great city of the Son of God. In the place before the portal happen things which are for the future of the world you live in, but which are in the shadow. There is a raging war before the walls of the city. There occur earthquakes which destroy the walls of the old city and process for the new one. When the pipes trumpet, there are they are doing it there. There are the battalions fights. There the battalion fights, and every traveler, worshiper who would be killed on their way to God's city if the soldiers of Christ who guard the city didn't rescue them in time. And the city has a river which encircles it on all sides, and it serves as an island in a big sea for those, who are blessed. And if someone swims in this water and would sink down, he would get out and find himself on the island again. There is a big, beautiful lagoon and a warm southern shores where the blessed visitor can get a pleasant relaxation. Here comes often even the bride of the kingly son, clothed in their bridal garment, in same way as if she was ready for her husband. Her beauty is supernatural, her eyes are like fire of love, and her banners are strong as God's banners. She gives a banner to everyone who spots her and who can catch up with her. Only the pure hearted can see her, for she is shy and is hiding for anyone who would look after her with shameful eyes. She is pure and holy, and she does not know what sin is. The eyes of the chosen one will find her, and his thirst will be quenched, and her mantle will wrap him. Her beauty is the holiness of the very love, which name is the bride and the city of saints, descending from God. Where Orion is, where the star never sets down, there is the portal, the gate of the city which rules over the cities of the world. That's an interesting passage, huh? Because supposedly that's Orion, the belt of Orion, is where all the new stars are being born of the heavenly luminaries. It is guarded by strong warriors who do not listen to depravity and or bribes, and whose faces are like dark stone towards any temptation and luxury. They do not look at the worldly things, nor do they listen to the worldly things, because things from the world are dead things to them. Their machines, vessels, are as fast as thought, with which they travel between the worlds, and their eyes do not miss anybody who violates its borders. But the Orion itself isn't the throne of the Almighty God. And oh, how powerful is its movement coming and going between the worlds in the universe. When the throne moves, the universe is shaking and the stars disperse on its way. And the face show up of him who sits on the throne. His image resembles a man, but his brightness is so great that nobody can look at the face. When he starts to speak, the substances, foundations of everything created goes apart, the soul from spirit and the body from the soul, and the frameworks of all created things are trembling, as if everything visible and invisible had come to its end. But when he sees the chosen sons and daughters with loving look, then his eyes shine like stars, like when somebody would like to hug a newborn child in its cradle of love, and his starry crown shines like the first created stars, bowing before their everlasting King. He holds in his hand the cup containing the seven stars. If someone holds it, he will rule together with him over the heavenly places. This is the cup of the heavenly kingdom, which is prepared for those who are washed with the blood of the Lamb, clothed with his wedding garment. He who has it has also the bride, wife, because he came to the wedding of the kingly son. This was the same cup in which once I saw Joseph to gather the precious blood of the crucified Jesus. All right, we'll pick up the final two chapters on the other side, chapter 17 and 18, which the text in itself is just absolutely mind blowing, and especially these last few chapters, We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody, for final segment. I do believe that we will be able to get through this text, and the next book I'll be working on is called the Chronicles of Navi, which it's going to be a while for that one, but hopefully by the end of spring we'll be able to get these Thracian Chronicles into print and have them available for those of you that are interested in reading them for yourself. And hopefully the translations will be um, clarified in a great in a great way, so that they're um, more easily under, understandable. All right, let's finish this up. Chapter 17. And there, beyond those worlds and beyond many waters, is the axis, the foundation of the universe, and the foundation of the center of the city. In the center of the city, there is a hard and pure glass like crystal. It resembles a sea over which only the chosen, called from there, can walk on it. And upon this crystal glass are written things with God's signs, letters, and symbols, which are not possible for the man to understand and to know them, even if he would see them, because these are secrets which uphold the universe and which put in order the worlds in it. Sounds like a dome, firmament, molten looking glass, the sea of glass. Same thing as what I've been covering in the Throne of God series. The secrets are structures and laws which create everything into existence. These are the words which God Himself had written, the Father of everything and everybody. Nobody has ever seen the image of God except the Son, and those whom the Son will reveal to. God's voice is severe, like the heavenly thunder which shakes the worlds, and His looks are severe, and nobody can come near His presence except if the Holy Spirit will allow him to. His dwelling place is wrapped, enveloped in by darkness, and in the midst of it there is inaccessible light. When God begins to speak, the angel of comfort takes stand before him for the sake of the chosen, so the soul of the mortal might not be killed before the face of the eternal God, for the reason of his nature by being all consuming and raging fire. He who has seen God have received a gift from him that is an inwardly life. In this gift is the source for all secret knowledge and revelations, whom God the Father himself had chosen. And behind the walls of the city, and behind the lagoon and the southern shores, there is a hill like the Eleonic, whatever that means. Um, There, the teacher of teachers instructs his pupils, disciples. He is humble and merciful and long suffering, long patient, and he never rejects those who have come to be obedient to his word. He removed his kingly clothing and descended from his throne, and dressed like a shepherd, he calmly sat down on the grass of that famous hill. In that hill you will meet his looks, eyes, and you will receive his word, and he will point to you the right way, comforting you because he is the comforter. He will not quarrel, nor will he raise his voice, nor will he reject a pupil, disciple, because he is the true teacher. Many took a seat before his feet, poor and rich, strong and weak, small and big. They came to listen to his voice so their souls and bodies may heal. Here is the place for the humble hearted and the peacemakers, for those who are merciful will receive mercy. Come here with your needs and thirst, longing for justice, and you will find answer and peace in your soul. What more is that in the city there are streets on which always goes on a festive procession. Beautiful young men and women meet there filled with joy and burning love for God, accompanied by unforgettable, unique heavenly music which revives the strength of its listeners. This is the source for joy, laughter, and contentment, something which is experienced seldom in the world you are living and which is short lived. In the city, there are also squares, a place where is located the school of the great teachers of faith, the great saints of Christ's church. Educate there the pupils, disciples, so God's knowledge will not be lost forever, knowledge which was given to the chosen ones. This is the place where the seals of the book of the books are opened, and he who learned the songs of the Lamb will play it on the harps. From this place also come out many languages and tongues like fiery flames, which descend upon the chosen ones from all worlds. Here is the river of life, and if someone drinks from this water, many rivers of life will flow through someone's womb. Tender girls fill up their containers, vessels with this pure water and bring it to the thirsty ones who are seeking to drink it. On their feast, young, snowy men pour out in precious containers, vessels, matchless wine, and offer it to girls. There is also a holy spring pool for bathing, and anybody who bathes in it obtains beauty, vigor, and health. There, everybody is hugging each other and give each other holy kisses, pure and free from defilement. The godly beauty is powerful, and the godly power is beauty. The love is pure and holy because it is in God. There are also many other places and many things and powerful words which open ways to those places. I am not allowed to write about it because they are prepared only for those who God chose from the beginning, already before the creation of the world, for those who will live in God's city. Because this heavenly city is preordained to all God's holy people, chosen from the whole earth, and soon the way to the city will be revealed, and its doors, portals will be opened, and people will enter and go out and be in their countries and in the new Matterick of God, and will populate it from one end to another, and will be honored citizens of Christ's city. All right, last chapter. Chapter 18. But you will ask, when, Father? When will be fulfilled all those things so God's city may come down and be populated with people? And who will show our nation the right path so we may enter the upper Terakia, the invisible Terakia, God's land, so that the Thrace may be renewed, and so that Trachea, earthly Thrace, and Terakia may be again one as it was in the beginning. My son, the promise lay upon those who are chosen by Christ, among which you are and your descendants, and upon the whole sacred Thracian nation, which speaks God's language throughout these centuries. But this will happen during the time of the great Arihi, who will come from God, and even those, the two witnesses who are before the face of the King of Kings, night and day, our God Christ. Wow, there are a lot of. All right. So that I can explain the footnotes, I'm gonna give me just 1 minute to open this chapter 18 in a separate text as well, so that I can explain the footnotes as we go along, because there is a lot of information here. And I don't want it to be confusing, so. All right, let's see. Arahi, in the Bohairic language, this means guardian of the mysteries of Thrace. So, in that first portion, let's go back. And I'll read, because there's a lot of words that I don't know the meanings to. And so I'll explain this as we go so that it'll make more sense. But this will happen during the time of the great Arihi, the Arihi, Bohairic meaning the keeper of the secrets, of the great mysteries, and of the two witnesses who are before the face of the King of Kings night and day, our God Christ. Which, if you don't know, that's Enoch and Elijah, because neither of them died and were taking up, into paradise, and they will succumb to death when they return as the two witnesses. They'll be killed by the Antichrist and left in the streets of Jerusalem for 3.5 days. All right, continuing. I might not make it through this. After the time of the great king priests in antiquity, after the empire of the wolves, Rome occupied territories which previously belonged to the shepherds, the oracles, and the province of Sebayot, territories from Egypt to the river Pison. The tribes of our people nation were scattered without shepherds and without prophetic visions. Because of the betrayal and the fratricide, stimulated, incited by demons who darkened the minds and the will of those who were not willing to submit to the god Isis, Dione, the faithful, Amen. Today, there isn't one who will, one spirit and one heart, which could lead in right and just way the destiny of the Bogari. But God himself, through his bright manifestation, promised me to see in a vision that during the days of my grandchildren, it will appear a man from God who will be taught as a child in Thracian wisdom, a God's prophet, Trachit, the Thracian patriot, a Thracian descendant of Beshoi and Geti, of the Geti tribe. I'm not going to read all these terms because I want to make it through this text. If I have time at the end, I'll try to clarify some of these. Regarding this child, a prophecy will be fulfilled, and he will be called the little Orphi, a young man who will restore the rule of Christ's peace and justice. And he will lead to the holy Calvary of all Thracian people in the steps of the King of Kings, the God of our forefathers, God, the ruler of the great Heros. This, our Father of peace, will remain with honor before the face of God, Isis, and he will prepare his way through so the Almighty might again dwell in our land. Then the Dion of Thrace, the sun-giving Isis, will shine again over us with his face and with the light of justice, and will warm up our nation in our holy land. This new saint will pull out from the rock, from the eternal God Christ, the Word, not water like Moses did in the desert for the Israelites, but the two-edged sword coming out from the mouth of the God, the Word. Namely, this is the Alpha and the Omega, which is God's language of invocation and creation. This is even the figurative language of embodiment in form of the Word in the world of the thing in being. With this sword, the chosen ones from our people and nation will defeat the enemies of humankind, so the kingdom of the holy heresy might be restored as it was plausible from the beginning. But the holy heresy, heresy, angels and God's righteous men guard that sacred place, which is indivisible by God the Word Himself, Christ Jesus. Because what cannot be detached from God the Word is implanted in God's chosen one through the most holy Spirit of Christ. So the chosen can be united with God as his just vessel. And Orphi, the book of Navi is all about Orphi, the priest. He was the priest king during 5500 BC. He who reads may understand it and take a stand at God's right hand, anointed in God's armor, and judge for the demons or Orahonte, who rage among the humans. This is the spirit who dwells in the Horosi, who worship the spirit because he, Eros, loves the image of God and the glory of creation. And he battles Ares with fire and sword against the demons of lies who sow chaos and darkness. This is the heroes who is Eros, and in the same time Ares, namely God who is love, but also a consuming fire, who judges the world. He rides victoriously in front of 10,000s and thousands and thousands of his soldiers, which that reminds me of the book of Enoch. He will return with 10,000s of his saints. The same little Orphi will be led by God's Spirit to deserted places and ancient ruins of Thrace. He will gather the dry bones from the great times of the ancient kings and will revive them. And when he will defeat every demonic lust and temptation, then he will reject without hesitation the human imperialistic proposals for fame and richness. Likewise, he will reject the seductive sorcery caused by the unclean spirits. The deceived think they can rule over the creatures without being subjugated to God's will. But because Orphelia will conceive very strong love and will suffer in his compassion, he will renounce profanity and corruptibility so he may pass through all probations by being dedicated to God, Isis. Because what was written must be fulfilled, that he who truthfully seeks will find, and that he who is just and knocks, it will be opened to him. In the same way, the ancient words of Thrace will be revealed to the little Orphelia, because he is a faithful branch from the big Orphi, and he will see these words and read them, and he will understand. With nasal lips, he will pronounce hidden secrets, and with trembling hands will grind and knit future existence. Because God has determined for him to take out from Christ, God the Word of Thrace, the sword of the honorable, in whom dwells the Spirit of Christ, so he may be stronger of God's knowledge and wisdom, like a handy hand which spins the weapon, and so the inwardly in him may grow in recognizing the eagerness and power of godly Thracian appealing invitation. This is the kingly sword which was pulled out and which pierces the hearts of all the creations and creatures in cosmos, which gather the eagles around the body of the world, and which puts in order thousands and hundreds and half hundreds of free men and slaves, kings and nations, masters and servants, all kind of humans and lineages. This same Orphelia will restore the teaching which reforms the officialdom of the Arahai, the rose and the measurement of the whole earth before the great day of the Lord. See, I wrote to you now, Theophil, about God's secrets according all that which God allowed me by his will to be as a witness for what I personally have seen and experienced, so you and your descendants may enter the new earth of God's city. And so you may teach the other faithful, because this is God's will, that the faithful will populate his city and his Madarich, New Jerusalem, and God himself will dwell among his own for eternity. Amen. All right, we made it, and with just a minute to spare, it's my opinion that the Most High is bringing forth the Thracian Chronicles and making them available to the world so that people will understand and know that the most ancient peoples were Christians and that they had the knowledge and understanding of who Christ was, and that the prophecies of his coming go back and predate the Sumerian and the ancient Egyptians, and even that of the pre-flood world. That the after the flood of Noah's day, the Thracians being the first culture and civilization and people, they were Christians and they knew about the prophecies of his coming. And they wrote it down in their chronicles. And the chronicles did not just had not even come to light and were not decoded until 2006 due to, in my opinion, the Most High wanting the Spirit to be poured out on all flesh. And so Dr. Stephen Guide, God bless him in all of his efforts and all that he did in bringing forth this information and dying for it, because it's my opinion he was killed for bringing forth this information. Um, we owe him a great debt. And my work in bringing forth the Thracian Chronicles is to honor his legacy and make the world know of his work and of these Thracian Hebrew, the ancient Hebrew calendar, the lunar-based calendar, to that of the Gregorian solar-based calendar, and it aligns them in unity so that those of you that have had difficult time trying to discern and to make sense of the teachings that I've been bringing forth on um, how to figure out when Kadesh occurs, which is the time of the new moon, and how to determine the four sabbatical weeks which follow in succession after Kadesh. This particular calendar will help explain all that in great detail so that you can just look at, every month and every week and be able to not only know what the months are as well as the day according to the Hebrew calendar, um, and become familiar with the name of the months in that manner. But you'll all also be able to determine when the Sabbaths occur in alignment. because there's 5 in each lunar month, and they fall on different days of the week according to the Gregorian calendar. And so, um, and whereas most people have believed that all these Sabbaths, or that Sabbath occurs once in every 7 days, this is not how it plays out according to the ancient Hebrew lunar calendar. And so I have created and spent the last couple weeks working on this in order to help people to be able to make better sense of how they come together, because each Gregorian year is different, and the Hebrew calendar aligns differently with each one of the years. And so, like Passover and the 7 Levitical feast days, they all fall, become a disciple, and also hanging out with the apostles. And so in this story, we'll pick it up in the last chapter of section 2. He and the other apostles were going out and trying to cast out demons from uh, the different people that they found in the area which were possessed. And they had failed to do so because they had come up against some very strong uh, legion. And so when we go into this chapter, we'll pick up with that particular story. And then there's some very interesting portions in the latter chapters. I think when we get to chapter 15 and onwards, that are really absolutely mind blowing, because they speculate on uh, things in the future and interdimensional dimensions, lucid dreaming. I mean, just the book is so very profound. But anyways, in the first portion, just to catch you up for those that did not hear about or have had listened to those particular shows, just a really quick breakdown of the first 2 segments. In the first one, the blood of Yeshua spills into Longinus's blind eye, and he becomes healed. And then after becoming healed, he is invited by the apostles to come and hang out with them, and then he meets Lazarus. And Lazarus shares with him the story of his resurrection. And it's very profound, and it convicts him. It really touches his heart. It fills him with the Spirit. And then in the second portion, he goes out with the apostles, and they're trying to cast out spirits. And he meets Martha, who's Lazarus's sister, and she tells him that Lazarus shares the story of how they believe, or this story in the English. There is some mythology surrounding Longinus, from what I understand, in the Eastern Orthodox Church, that he is considered to be a saint. And so, anyways, I did share a lot of that information on his background. One thing I do need to clarify just right up front is that in some of the mythology, some of the old stories about Longinus, it it speaks about him as being born in Cappadocia, which according to the work of Dr. Stephen Guide, and the who is the person that decoded the Thracian script. He was born in Sofia, which is a place in Bulgaria, which was part of ancient Thrace. And he says it throughout the text, how the Thracian people are his mother culture, and how, he's basically a Thracian soldier um, that was a part of the Roman army, and that's how he ended up being there on the Hill of the Skulls and Calvary during Yeshua's crucifixion, and how he was the soldier that had pierced the side of Christ during his crucifixion, and having become witness to all of um, the miraculous happenings that had occurred as sign in both the heaven and the earth, with the blood red moon, the eclipse, the lunar eclipse, and also with the earthquakes. And we know that the veil of the temple was rent, and that there were other signs which took place, which confirmed to him that they had indeed murdered the Son of God. And so he became a disciple, and the first two parts speak about his conversion and having all differently each year as well, according to the solar based calendar. And so I thought this would be an easy way for people to, just in having a regular calendar, to make that determination and to be able to keep alignment with it in that way. And so I've got just a couple other things that I'm going to tweak on it, but I think probably by next week I'll be finished, and then I'll be able to share with you link those of you that are interested. It's going to sell at a very reasonable price, basically, for what you would spend on any other calendar. So I think probably about like $15 or so. And I'm not, trying to make money off of it. It's just basically to provide you a service so that those of you that are interested in following Sabbath can do so, and also Sabbath, according to the way that it occurs, because the Kadesh is excluded from the following 4 sabbatical weeks. It occurs differently according to each Gregorian solar based month. And so, anyways, when I release it, I'll explain it in greater detail. But tonight I'm going to finish up. If I, um, if we have the time to, which I'm going to go ahead and get into the text very soon, because I have 6 chapters, and some of them are very extensive, but the rest of the story is very interesting. And I do have, I believe Kathy will be able to share with you the links in the chat room to the 2 previous programs on the Thracian Chronicles. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Yeah, Kathy's already shared a couple of those. But anyways, it's a fascinating story, incredibly interesting text, and it's one that you're not going to find.
Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat, and with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
I would like everybody to know, wish discernment for them more than all else. Not ready yet, to each in their own time. Long has it been in coming to this. Wallowing through the uncertainty of false righteousness, trailing fragment truth, the Spirit found me courting awkward circumstance. Chill moments of uncertain knowing, recognition with others of kindred soul, muse-led, poem as ritual, remembrance, awakening, I went seeking others. We are to remind each other, one another, of past legend, even as we question our own soul's knowing. And now we can laugh, passing time, sharing passages of favored scriptures, poems, immortalized to paper. He will come again, announcing presence with signs and wonder. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio on Studio B. And tonight I'm going to cover and read to you the last portion of the Thracian Chronicles, the book of Longinus, which is a very interesting text. But I also wanted to let people know that I am almost finished with the calendar, which basically converts the